He wasn't supposed to make it through the night. The syringe rests between gloved fingers, clear liquid catching the cold fluorescent light like a quiet verdict already decided. And Officer Daniel Hayes doesn't look at it. Not yet, because if he does, it becomes real. And if it becomes real, then everything he and Rex have survived together, the miles, the nights, the calls that never made the news, will end in a room that smells like antiseptic and silence instead of honor. Rex lies on the steel table, his body still, breath shallow but steady in a way that feels wrong. Not fading, not fighting, just waiting. And that's what unsettles Daniel most. Because this dog has never waited for anything in his life. Not commands, not danger, not pain. And yet now he is still as winter. Amber eyes fixed not on the strangers in scrubs, not on the instruments, but on the man standing beside him, as if the entire world has narrowed down to one face, one scent, one heartbeat. "You're a good boy," Daniel says, but the words come out fractured, like something breaking quietly under pressure, and his hand presses against Rex's neck, feeling the warmth there, the life that shouldn't be slipping away this soon. Not like this, not without a fight, because Rex was never the kind to go quietly, never the kind to accept an ending without pushing back against it with everything he had. The monitor hums low in the background, a steady rhythm that feels too calm for a moment like this, too even, too composed. And somewhere behind Daniel, a voice explains something about comfort, about letting go, about doing the right thing. But the words blur into noise because Daniel isn't listening anymore. He's watching the smallest details instead. The way Rex's chest rises, not erratic, not collapsing, just measured, controlled, as if the dog himself is deciding how this moment should unfold. Then it happens, slow and deliberate. Rex shifts, not with panic, not with weakness, but with intention, his paw lifting, trembling only slightly before it reaches forward and presses against Daniel's arm, pulling him closer. And for a second the room disappears, the lights, the voices, the waiting syringe. All of it fades under the weight of that single touch, because this isn't instinct, this isn't reflex, this is something else. Something deeper, something that feels like a message without words, and Daniel feels it in his chest like a quiet impact he can't explain. "Hey, I'm right here," he whispers, lowering himself until his forehead almost touches Rex's, and the dog exhales, soft, steady, as if grounding himself in that connection, as if reminding them both that this moment isn't over yet, not really. Across the room, a monitor flickers, just slightly, a pattern shifting in a way so subtle it almost goes unnoticed, but not entirely, not to everyone, because somewhere behind the silence, something is off, something small, something that doesn't belong in a story that's supposed to end right here, right now. And just as the syringe begins to move, just as the final step draws near, a voice cuts through the stillness, uncertain but sharp enough to stop everything mid-breath. "Doctor, look at this." The voice does not rise, but it cuts through the room sharper than any alarm, and the hand holding the syringe pauses midair, suspended between decision and doubt, as every eye shifts toward the monitor where a faint irregularity flickers like something trying to be seen but not yet understood. Daniel does not turn at first, his focus still locked on Rex, on the weight of that paw resting against his arm, on the steady warmth that refuses to feel like a life fading. Because something in his gut has already begun to whisper that this is not the ending they were told to accept. "What is it?" the senior veterinarian asks, stepping closer, voice controlled but tighter now, and the younger technician leans in, pointing at a subtle wave pattern that rises and falls with an inconsistency too deliberate to ignore. "That rhythm, it should not be doing that if he is shutting down," she says, and the room shifts, not dramatically, not all at once, but like a tide quietly changing direction beneath the surface. Daniel finally looks up, eyes moving from Rex to the screen, and he does not understand the data, not in technical terms, but he understands instinct, and instinct tells him that Rex is not letting go, that something inside this dog is still holding the line. "Are you sure?" the veterinarian murmurs, more to himself than anyone else, and he reaches for the monitor controls, adjusting, zooming, searching for confirmation, for error, for anything that can restore certainty to a moment that has suddenly lost it. Rex exhales again, slow and measured, his gaze never leaving Daniel. And there is a quiet strength in it now, not desperation, not fear, but something that feels almost like patience, as if he has been waiting for this exact hesitation, this crack in the final decision. His vitals are stable in a way they should not be. The technician continues, her voice gaining steadiness as she speaks. And there is something else. Look at the oxygen levels. They are not dropping the way they should if this were organ failure. The veterinarian's brow tightens, and for a moment he says nothing, just watches, calculates, reconsiders, while the syringe lowers slightly, no longer a certainty, now just an option suspended in doubt. Daniel swallows hard, his voice rough but steady when he finally speaks. You said he was shutting down. The veterinarian nods slowly, but it is not the confident nod from before. It is hesitant, fractured, like a man realizing he may have missed something that mattered. That was based on the symptoms we saw earlier, he replies, choosing each word carefully. But this does not fully align with that diagnosis. The room grows quieter, not empty, but focused, every movement more deliberate now, every breath carrying a different weight, and Daniel feels it. That shift from finality to possibility, small but undeniable. Rex's paw presses just a little firmer against his arm, and Daniel closes his hand around it without thinking, grounding himself in that contact as if it is the only thing keeping him from falling apart or breaking into hope too soon. Run another scan, the technician says softly, already moving, already pulling up additional readings, and the veterinarian does not argue, does not hesitate, because something in the data has unsettled him enough to listen. Seconds stretch, long and thin, each one carrying more tension than the last, until a new set of numbers appears, and the technician inhales sharply, not in panic, but in realization. This is not systemic failure, she says, almost to herself. This looks like interference, like something is suppressing normal function rather than destroying it. The word hangs there, unspoken but understood, and the veterinarian straightens, eyes sharpening as the pieces begin to shift into a different picture entirely. Daniel does not know the science, but he knows this much. If something is being suppressed, then it can be fought, it can be reversed, it can be challenged, and for the first time since he walked into this room, the future is no longer a single closed door. The syringe is set down quietly on the tray, its presence no longer urgent, no longer inevitable, and the veterinarian turns back toward Rex with a new expression, not resignation, but intent. We need to reassess everything, he says, voice steady again but changed, carrying a different kind of weight now, and Daniel feels something rise in his chest, fragile but real, like the first breath after being held underwater too long. Rex blinks slowly, his eyes still fixed on Daniel, and in that silent exchange there is no fear, no goodbye, only a quiet understanding that whatever this moment is becoming, they are still in it together, still holding the line, still not done. The room does not move, but everything inside it changes, as if the air itself has shifted direction, and the weight that once pressed down on every breath is now lifting just enough to make space for something unfamiliar, something fragile that no one dares to name yet. The veterinarian studies the screen again, slower this time, more careful, tracing each line of data like a map that has suddenly redrawn itself, and the confidence he carried earlier has softened into something closer to humility. If this is suppression, he says quietly, almost to himself, then something is interfering with his system, not shutting it down. The technician nods, her fingers moving quickly across the controls, pulling up additional readings, comparing, layering information until the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Look at the neural response, she adds, pointing to another set of signals that pulse with a faint but steady rhythm. It is inconsistent with terminal decline. It is blocked, like something is dampening the signals rather than ending them. Daniel does not fully understand the science, but he hears the difference in their voices, the shift from certainty to investigation, from conclusion to question, and that is enough to anchor him, enough to keep him standing when everything inside him had already begun preparing to fall. Rex remains still, but not empty, not fading, his breathing measured, his body holding on to something deeper than instinct. And when Daniel looks into his eyes again, he sees it more clearly now, not just presence, but awareness, a quiet alertness that should not exist in a body that was supposedly shutting down. "Hey, stay with me," Daniel whispers, his voice steadier now, not because the fear is gone, but because it has been replaced by something stronger, a refusal to let go without understanding the truth. Rex's ears twitch slightly at the sound, a small movement, almost invisible, but enough to send a ripple through the room, because it is not the reaction of a dog slipping away, it is the response of one still listening. The veterinarian exhales slowly, then straightens, his posture shifting into something more decisive. "We need to run a toxin panel," he says, the words landing with quiet urgency. "There are compounds that can mimic organ failure, slow everything down without causing immediate damage, rare, but not impossible." The technician looks up, surprised, then nods quickly, already moving to prepare the test, and Daniel feels the words settle into his mind. Toxin, not disease, not failure, but something introduced, something external, something that does not belong. "You are saying this might not be natural," Daniel says, his voice low, controlled, but carrying an edge that was not there before. The veterinarian meets his gaze for a brief moment, and in that silence, there is no denial, only uncertainty. "I am saying we do not have enough evidence to continue with what we were about to do," he replies carefully, "and that is enough. Enough to stop the ending. Enough to open the door that had already been closing." Rex shifts again, just slightly, his paw still resting against Daniel's arm, and Daniel tightens his grip around it, grounding himself in that contact, feeling the warmth, the life that is still there, still fighting in its own quiet way. Time stretches again, but differently now, not heavy and final, but tense and searching, every second filled with movement, with purpose, with the possibility that something has been missed and can still be found. The machine beeps softly, steady, almost patient, as if it too is waiting for the truth to catch up with the moment, and Daniel leans closer, his forehead nearly touching Rex's once more. "You are not done, are you?" he murmurs, not as a question, but as a belief he is choosing to hold on to, because everything in this room is beginning to point toward the same quiet conclusion. This was never meant to end here. Not like this, not without a fight. And somewhere beneath the numbers, beneath the silence, beneath the doubt, something real is still holding on, refusing to let go. The seconds begin to carry weight again, but this time it is not the weight of ending. It is the weight of decision, of choosing what to believe when certainty has already been broken, and the room moves with a quiet urgency that replaces the stillness from before. The technician works quickly, drawing a small sample, her hands steady but faster now, guided by purpose rather than routine, while the veterinarian watches the monitor and the dog at the same time, as if trying to reconcile two different truths that no longer align. Daniel does not step back, not even when they ask for space. He only shifts slightly to the side, his hand never leaving Rex, because distance now feels like something dangerous, something that might break whatever fragile thread is still holding this moment together. Rex's breathing remains steady, not stronger, not weaker, just present, and every rise of his chest feels like a quiet argument against everything they had been told just minutes ago. "If this is a toxin, we need to identify it fast," the veterinarian says, his voice controlled but carrying a new edge, one that comes from realizing time was almost spent on the wrong choice, and the technician nods, already running the panel, already watching the screen for any sign that can turn suspicion into proof. The machine hums softly, processing, analyzing, translating what the body cannot say out loud, and Daniel listens to that sound like it is a clock, each second stretching longer than it should, each moment holding more than it can carry. He looks at Rex again, closer this time, searching for something he might have missed, and then he sees it, not dramatic, not obvious, but there, in the slight tension around the eyes, in the way the gaze holds steady instead of drifting. There is awareness, there is presence, there is something that does not belong to a body that is shutting down. "You knew, didn't you?" Daniel whispers, the words barely more than breath, but Rex's ear flicks again, small, deliberate, enough to confirm what cannot be explained, that this dog has been holding on, waiting, trusting that something would change. The veterinarian glances over, catching the movement this time, and his expression tightens, not with fear, but with focus. That response, that is not consistent with neurological decline. He says, more certain now. And he steps closer, examining Rex again with a different lens, not as a patient beyond help, but as one whose story has not been fully understood. The technician suddenly pauses, her eyes narrowing at the screen, and for a brief second, the room holds its breath again. There, she says, pointing, her voice steady but charged. There is an abnormal compound present in the bloodstream, low concentration, but enough to disrupt normal function. The words land heavy, not loud, but undeniable, and Daniel feels something shift deep inside his chest. Not relief yet, but direction, something to fight against, something real. Can it be reversed? He asks, his voice firm now, no hesitation left in it, and the veterinarian nods slowly, already thinking, already moving ahead. If we act quickly, yes, but we need to stabilize him first and administer a counteragent that will support his system while we clear it. The syringe on the tray remains untouched, its purpose now replaced by something entirely different, and the room transforms again, not into a place of goodbye, but into a place of action. The technician prepares the new medication, her movements precise, deliberate, while the veterinarian adjusts the equipment, monitoring every change, every signal, every breath as if each one matters more than the last. Daniel leans in closer, his forehead nearly touching Rex's once again, his voice low but steady. Stay with me, partner, he says, not as a plea, but as a promise, and Rex exhales softly, the sound quiet but certain, as if answering in the only way he can. The monitor shifts slightly, not dramatically, but enough to show that something is happening, something small but real, and in that subtle change, the room finds its new direction. This is no longer about letting go. This is about holding on, about fighting for the truth that almost went unseen. And as the first dose of the counteragent is prepared, as the plan begins to take shape, Daniel feels it clearly now. This was never the end. It was the moment before the truth revealed itself, the moment before everything changed. The moment the counteragent enters the line, everything narrows. Down to time, not hours, not minutes, but seconds that stretch thin and fragile, each one carrying the weight of whether they were right to stop, whether they were right to believe that something deeper was at play. The veterinarian watches the monitor without blinking, his posture rigid with focus, while the technician tracks every fluctuation, every subtle shift in numbers that now mean more than they ever did before, because this is no longer routine, this is correction. This is the quiet attempt to undo a mistake that almost happened. Daniel does not move at all, his hand still wrapped around Rex's paw, his thumb pressing lightly against the fur as if reminding the dog that he is still there, still holding the line with him, and Rex's breathing changes, not dramatically, not suddenly, but enough to make Daniel notice, enough to make him lean in closer as if the smallest difference might carry the truth they are waiting for. There is a response. The technician says softly, her voice controlled but unable to hide the shift in tone, and the veterinarian steps closer, eyes scanning the monitor as a slight variation appears in the rhythm, a faint strengthening, not yet stable, not yet safe, but undeniably different from before. It is subtle, but it is there, he confirms, and the words land like something fragile being placed carefully into the room, something that cannot be rushed, cannot be forced, only watched and protected. Rex exhales again, deeper this time, and his chest rises just a fraction higher than before, and Daniel feels it under his hand. That change, that quiet return of strength that should not have been possible if everything they believed earlier had been true. Stay with me, partner, Daniel murmurs again, his voice steady, grounded, no longer breaking, because now there is something to hold on to, something real, and Rex's ear flicks once more, not weak, not fading, but responsive, present, as if the sound of that voice is guiding him back through whatever fog he had been trapped inside. The veterinarian adjusts the settings, fine-tuning the support, watching how the body reacts, how the system begins to respond when the interference is challenged instead of accepted, and the technician prepares another measured dose, her movements precise, guided by a growing certainty that they are no longer guessing. They are following something real. The compound is beginning to break down, she says, her eyes fixed on the updated readings. It is slow, but the body is reacting. Daniel does not fully understand the science behind it, but he understands what those words mean. They mean Rex is still here, still fighting, still refusing to let go, and that is enough. The room no longer feels cold, no longer feels like a place where endings happen. It feels different now, charged, alive with purpose. Every sound sharper, every movement more deliberate, as if everyone inside it has silently agreed that this life matters, that this moment matters, that they are not letting it slip away without a fight. Rex's paw presses again, this time with a faint strength that was not there before, and Daniel closes his eyes for a brief second, not in relief, not yet, but in recognition, because that pressure, that small return of force, is something he knows, something he has felt before in moments when everything depended on holding on just a little longer. The monitor reflects it too, not dramatically, not in a way that would impress anyone outside this room, but enough to confirm that something is changing, something is turning, and the veterinarian nods once, slow and deliberate. "We continue," he says, his voice steady, resolved, and the technician moves to prepare the next step without hesitation. Time continues to pass, but it no longer drags. It moves forward, carrying them with it, each second building on the last, each breath proving that the story they were about to end is still unfolding, still unwritten. Daniel leans closer once more, his voice low, firm, no doubt left in it. "You are not done, Rex," he says, and for the first time since all of this began, it does not sound like hope, it sounds like truth. The rhythm begins to change in a way that no one can ignore now, not subtle anymore, not hidden beneath uncertainty, but present, building, each beat of the monitor carrying more strength than the last, and the room responds to it instinctively, like a team that has found its footing after nearly losing it. The veterinarian leans closer, his eyes locked onto the readings, following every shift, as if tracing the path back from the edge they almost crossed, and the technician adjusts the flow of the counteragent with careful precision, her movements calm but purposeful, guided by data that is finally beginning to make sense. "The levels are dropping faster now," she says, her voice steady, and there is something different in it, something that sounds like belief taking shape. Daniel feels it before he fully hears it, in the way Rex's paw presses more firmly against his arm, in the slight tightening of muscle beneath his touch, in the breath that comes a little deeper, a little fuller, like air finding its way back into a place it had been pushed out of. "That is it, stay with me," Daniel murmurs, his voice low and grounded, no longer fighting to hold together, but guiding, steady, the way he has done countless times before in moments when everything depended on trust. Rex's eyes shift, just slightly, tracking Daniel more clearly now, focus sharpening, and in that gaze there is recognition, not fading memory, but presence, a quiet awareness that has returned piece by piece. The veterinarian nods once, slow and deliberate, his earlier doubt replaced by a clear direction. "His system is responding to the reversal," he says, and the words settle into the room like something earned, not given, something proven rather than hoped for. The technician prepares another measured dose, her hands steady, her timing precise, and as it is administered, the monitor reflects it almost immediately, a gradual strengthening, a stabilization that begins to hold instead of fluctuate. Daniel exhales without realizing he had been holding his breath, and for a brief second, his eyes close, not in relief, not yet fully, but in acknowledgement that they have crossed something unseen but real. Rex shifts again, this time more noticeably, his head moving slightly against the surface beneath him, not lifting, but adjusting, as if reclaiming space, and Daniel leans closer, his hand moving gently to support him. "Easy, partner. You are okay," he says softly, and the words land differently now, not as comfort for something ending, but as reassurance for something returning. The veterinarian steps back just enough to take in the full picture, the readings, the physical response, the alignment that had been missing before, and he lets out a slow breath. "We were looking at the wrong story," he says quietly, not to anyone in particular, but to the moment itself, to the realization that nearly cost them everything. The technician glances at him briefly, then back to the screen, her focus unwavering, because the work is not finished, not yet, but it is moving in the right direction, and that is enough to keep going. Rex's breathing continues to deepen, each inhale more certain, each exhale less strained, and Daniel feels the difference in his chest, like something heavy being lifted inch by inch. He keeps his hand on Rex, steady, constant, a point of connection that is not broken through any of this, and Rex responds again, a slight movement of his paw, a quiet squeeze that is stronger now, deliberate, unmistakable. The monitor holds its pattern, not perfect, but stable, and the room adjusts around that stability, every movement aligning with it, every decision guided by it. "We keep supporting him," the veterinarian says, his voice firm now, resolved, and the technician nods, already ahead, already preparing the next step, because this is no longer about uncertainty, it is about follow-through, about carrying this momentum forward. Daniel leans in one more time, his forehead close to Rex's, his voice steady, grounded in something deeper than hope. "You are coming back," he says, and this time, there is no question in it at all, only quiet certainty, the kind that does not need to be proven, because it can already be felt. The shift is no longer fragile, no longer something that could be mistaken for chance. It is real now, steady, building with each passing second, and the room moves with it, every motion aligned with the quiet return of something that almost slipped away. The monitor holds a stronger rhythm, not perfect, but consistent, and that consistency changes everything, because it gives direction, it gives purpose, it gives them something solid to stand on after the uncertainty that nearly ended it all. The veterinarian watches closely, no longer searching for errors, but tracking progress, confirming that what they are seeing is not temporary, not illusion, but recovery in motion. "He is stabilizing," he says, and this time the words carry weight, not caution, but confirmation, something earned through each measured response, each breath that grows deeper than the last. The technician adjusts the support again, fine-tuning every detail, her focus sharp, her movements precise, because now it matters even more, now that they know what is possible, now that they have seen what almost happened. Daniel remains where he has been from the start, unmoving except for the subtle shifts of his hand as it rests against Rex, feeling the changes directly, feeling the life return in ways no monitor can fully translate. Rex's breathing is stronger now, each inhale fuller, each exhale more certain, and his body responds in small but undeniable ways, a slight tightening of muscle, a faint adjustment of posture, movements that carry meaning far beyond their size. "That is it, keep going," Daniel murmurs, his voice calm, steady, the kind of tone that does not demand, but guides, the same voice that Rex has followed through chaos, through uncertainty, through moments where instinct was the only thing that mattered. Rex's eyes shift again, more focused now, locking onto Daniel with a clarity that was missing before, and in that gaze there is recognition, not fading, not distant, but present, grounded, as if he is finding his way back step by step. The veterinarian notices it too, the way the eyes track, the way the responses align with awareness, and he nods slowly, almost to himself. "Neurological function is returning," he says, and the words settle into the room like something sacred, something that does not need to be raised in volume to be understood. The technician glances at the readings, then back at Rex, her expression softening just slightly, not losing focus, but allowing for the recognition that this is no longer just a procedure. This is a life coming back into alignment. Another measured dose is administered, carefully timed, carefully observed, and the response is immediate enough to confirm what they now know. The interference is breaking down. The system is regaining control. The body is remembering how to function without the weight that had been holding it back. Daniel exhales slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough to be felt, but not released entirely, because he knows they are not finished, not yet, and he will not step away until he knows Rex is fully through this. Rex shifts again, more noticeably this time, his head lifting just a fraction before settling back. But the effort is there, the intent is there, and Daniel's hand moves gently to support him, steady, reassuring. "Easy. You are okay," he says, and the words land differently now, not as a hope, but as a truth that is unfolding. In real time, the monitor continues its steady pattern, each beat reinforcing the direction they are moving, and the veterinarian straightens slightly, his posture no longer tense with uncertainty, but grounded in control. "We continue support and monitor closely," he says, his voice firm, and the technician nods, already aligned, already moving with the same purpose. The room feels different now, not just because of the numbers, but because of what they represent. Not an ending avoided, but a truth uncovered, a life reclaimed from a moment that almost took it away. Daniel leans closer once more, his forehead near Rex's, his voice low, steady, certain. "You are still here," he says, and Rex responds. Not with words, not with movement that anyone outside this room would notice, but with something deeper, a quiet presence, a connection that never broke, only waited, and now, finally, is fully returning. The room settles into a quieter rhythm now, not because the tension has disappeared, but because it has transformed into focus, into a steady vigilance that replaces fear with purpose, and every sound feels clearer, more defined, like the world has narrowed down to the space around that table, where something fragile is being rebuilt moment by moment. The monitor continues its steady cadence, each tone no longer a question but an answer, and the veterinarian watches it with a calm that was not there before, his movements measured, his decisions no longer reactive but intentional. "We are past the critical threshold," he says, not loudly, but with a certainty that carries through the room, and the technician allows herself a small breath, a subtle release of tension that had been held too tightly for too long. Daniel hears it, but more than that, he feels it in Rex, in the weight of the paw still resting against his arm, stronger now, not gripping, but present with purpose, like a quiet reassurance that the fight has shifted from survival to recovery. Rex's breathing is deeper, more even, and when Daniel leans closer, he can feel the warmth returning in a way that is no longer fragile, no longer at risk of fading with the next second. "You did it," Daniel whispers, his voice softer now, not because he is unsure, but because the moment no longer demands urgency. It invites something quieter, something deeper. Rex's eyes remain open, steady, tracking Daniel with a clarity that leaves no doubt, and for the first time since this began, there is something else in that gaze, something beyond endurance, beyond holding on. There is calm. The technician adjusts the final settings, reducing support carefully, watching how the body responds without the same level of intervention, and the response holds, steady, consistent, proving that what they have restored is not temporary, it is real. "His system is maintaining on its own," she says, and the veterinarian nods once, slow and deliberate, confirming what they both see, what they both now trust. Daniel shifts slightly, easing his stance, but his hand remains where it has always been, because that connection has become something more than comfort. It has become a constant, a line that was never broken even when everything else nearly was. Rex moves again, this time lifting his head just enough to meet Daniel's hand, not fully, not with strength yet, but with intention, and Daniel responds instantly, supporting him gently, his voice low and steady. "Easy. You are okay," he says again. But now the words carry a different meaning, not reassurance, but acknowledgement of something already true. The room grows quieter, not empty, but settled, every movement slowing as the urgency fades into careful observation, into the kind of stillness that follows when something important has been preserved. The veterinarian steps back slightly, his eyes still on Rex, but his posture relaxed now, the tension that once held him rigid replaced by a quiet acceptance of what has been achieved. "We will continue monitoring, but he is out of immediate danger," he says, and the words land with a weight that is different from everything that came before, not heavy, but grounding, like something final in the best possible way. Daniel exhales slowly, the breath leaving him deeper than any before, and for a moment, he closes his eyes, not in exhaustion, but in gratitude, not spoken, not declared, just felt, steady and real. When he opens them again, Rex is still there, still looking at him, still present, and in that simple exchange, there is everything that matters. No need for explanation, no need for words, just the quiet understanding that they made it through something that almost took everything away. The monitor continues its steady rhythm, the room holds its calm, and Daniel leans closer one last time, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am right here," he says, and Rex does not need to move to answer, because the truth of it is already there, in the stillness, in the breath, in the quiet miracle that no one in this room will ever forget. Morning arrives quietly, not with sudden light, but with a soft shift in the color of the room, the cold fluorescence easing into something warmer as the first pale sunlight filters through the narrow window, touching the edges of metal and glass with a gentler glow. And for the first time since the night began, the space no longer feels like a place suspended between loss and decision. It feels like somewhere life has chosen to stay. The monitor continues its steady rhythm, no longer washed with urgency, but with quiet confidence, each tone now a reassurance instead of a question, and the veterinarian stands a few steps back, arms loosely folded, observing not as someone bracing for change, but as someone witnessing the result of it. The technician finishes a final check, her movements slower now, precise but no longer rushed, and she glances at Rex with a small, almost imperceptible smile before stepping aside. Daniel has not left his place, not for a second, and though the tension has eased from his shoulders, his hand remains where it has always been, resting against Rex as if that connection is the one thing he refuses to let go of, even now. Rex lies there, no longer still in the way he was before, but resting, breathing with a calm rhythm that fills the space between each second with something steady and real. And when his eyes open again, they do not search, they find, locking onto Daniel with a clarity that no longer carries confusion or distance, only presence. "Hey, there you are," Daniel says softly, his voice carrying a warmth that was not possible before, and Rex responds, not with effort, but with something simple, something small, a faint movement of his tail against the surface beneath him, a quiet gesture that carries more meaning than any words could hold. The veterinarian steps closer again, not out of urgency, but to confirm what is already clear, his expression calm, grounded, the weight of earlier decisions replaced by a quiet respect for what has unfolded. "He is going to recover," he says, and the statement lands gently, not as a dramatic declaration, but as a truth that no longer needs to be proven. Daniel closes his eyes for a brief moment, not to escape, but to take it in, to let it settle somewhere deeper than thought, somewhere that will remember this moment long after the details fade. When he opens them again, Rex is still there, still watching him, and the bond between them feels unchanged, not because nothing happened, but because everything that could have broken it did not succeed. Daniel leans in slightly, his forehead resting gently against Rex's, his voice low, steady, carrying the weight of everything that almost was and everything that now is. "You held on," he whispers, and Rex exhales softly, the sound calm, grounded, as if answering in the only way he needs to. Around them, the room continues its quiet return to normal, equipment reset, lights adjusted, the traces of urgency fading into routine. But for Daniel, nothing about this moment is ordinary. Nothing about it will ever be routine again. He looks down at Rex, his hand moving gently along the familiar line of his neck, feeling the warmth, the strength returning beneath the surface. And there is no need to say anything more, because what matters is already there, in the breath, in the stillness, in the simple fact that they are both still here. The monitor continues its steady tone, the sunlight grows a little stronger, and the world outside begins to move forward as it always does, unaware of what nearly happened inside this room, unaware of how close everything came to ending before it quietly changed direction. Daniel remains there a moment longer, not because he has to, but because he chooses to, because some moments are not meant to be rushed, not meant to be left behind too quickly. He looks at Rex one last time, a small, almost invisible smile forming at the edge of his expression, and in that quiet space between them, there is something that does not need to be spoken, something understood without words, that sometimes the line between ending and beginning is thinner than anyone realizes, and sometimes it is held in place by nothing more than a hand, a paw, and the choice not to let go.